Now we turn to Unit 11, Cells of the Nervous System. This will include Part A, what is the nervous system, and Part B, Glia. Parts A and B of Unit 11 are covered in this video. Part C, the neuron, being rather complicated, is separated into two videos. If you haven't done so, you might want to go through the introductory unit before continuing. What is the nervous system? There are two fundamental coordinating systems in the body. Both involve a response to a stimulus, a signal producing unit, a signal, a target of the signal, and a response action. The endocrine system is slow-acting, but its effects are long-lasting. The signal-producing unit are the glands. Actions are accomplished by secretion of hormones. The nervous system, on the other hand, is rapid-acting and its effects are short-lasting. The signal-producing units are the sense organs. The actions are accomplished by the transmission of nerve impulses. Both examples, the result is that an action is taken to coordinate and integrate. Generally, the stimulus begins the entire process. Details of the nervous system will make sense as we progress. There are two anatomical subdivisions of the nervous system. One is the central nervous system, CNS, composed of the brain, located in the cranium, and the spinal cord, located in the vertebrae. Clinically, this is convenient. It has four parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, brain stem, and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, on the other hand, PNS, is composed of nerves and ganglia. Let's look at the central nervous system. It contains gray and white matter, two kinds of material. The cerebral cortex is the outer gray matter of the cerebrum. It's divided into a right half and a left half. In the brain, each half is a hemisphere, so you refer to the cerebral hemisphere. The surface has folds called gyri and grooves called sulci to increase its surface area. The peripheral nervous system is composed of nerves and ganglia, as we said. Nerves include the cranial nerves, we'll abbreviate them CN. They're attached to the brain. They consist of 12 pairs. Most cranial nerves innervate the head and neck. Cranial nerve number 10 innervates the thoracic and abdominal organs. The spinal nerves, on the other hand, are attached to the spinal cord by 2 points of attachment, called the dorsal root and the ventral root. 31 pairs exist based on their location. Cervical, for example, includes 8 pairs. Thoracic, 9 pairs. 12 pairs. Lumbar, 5 pairs. Sacral, 5 pairs. And coccygeal, 1 pair. Peripheral nervous system has ganglia. These are bumps in the peripheral nervous system consisting of neuron cell bodies. You'll understand this a little later. Examples are the celiac ganglia in the chest, superior mesenteric ganglion, and the inferior mesenteric ganglion in the abdomen, and sympathetic chain ganglia located in the dorsal root of the spinal nerves. We refer to them as the dorsal root ganglion. Cell types in the nervous system include glia. These are supporting cells found both in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. And neurons. These are the nerve cells. They consist of a cell body that contains the usual cellular organelles, Axons, long extensions that conduct nerve impulses. And dendrites, extensions that receive and generate nerve impulses. I will draw neurons with an arrow showing the direction of the nerve impulse. This is different from the standard way of illustrating a neuron. The standard way is to use a reverse arrowhead. A pathway, a very important concept, is a chain of communicating neurons, as shown below. In the embryonic nervous system, it arises from neural ectoderm, which has arisen from ectodermal tissue. The neural ectoderm becomes a neural plate, and here we are looking at an end view of the embryo. I know, doesn't look much like the embryo, but it does show the neural plate. There's also neural crest that are not shown in this view. The neural plate becomes in order a neural groove with neural folds, a neural tube, and alongside the neural tube are the strips of the neural crest. The neural crest becomes sensory neurons of the peripheral nervous system. The neural tube becomes motor neurons of the peripheral nervous system, glia, and the central nervous system. The arrows indicate the direction of neuron growth. Let's look at the neural tube. The neural tube closes at about 26-day-old embryo. It closes in the middle first, and then the ends eventually last. Among the most common birth defects is failure of the neural tube to close. Failure to close at the anterior end is called anencephaly. Literally, it means without a brain. Failure to close at the posterior end is called what? Spina bifida. The anterior end of the neural tube forms enlargements. At first, there are 3 enlargements. The prosencephalon, literally the first brain or forebrain, it eventually develops into 2 parts, a telencephalon and a diencephalon. It means end brain and tween brain. The second major part is the mesencephalon, the midbrain. Meso means middle. And the third is the Rhombencephalon, or the hindbrain. Now that's an odd name because rhomb refers to shaped like a kite. Someone must have thought that's what it looked like when they looked at it under a microscope. It includes 2 subdivisions, the Metencephalon and the Myelencephalon. Myelin refers to the spinal cord, more specifically to white fatty material. You'll hear about this later. Let's look at the neural tube and the function of its enlargements. Now, this is a very simplified function. I do this simply as a frame of reference. For example, the telencephalon becomes the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the site of all conscious functions. The diencephalon becomes the thalamus and the hypothalamus. The thalamus is a sensory relay to the cerebrum, and the hypothalamus deals with visceral sensations. The mesencephalon becomes the midbrain. It's difficult to state one generalized function, so we'll just say for now that it acts as a sensory and motor relay. The metencephalon, on the other hand, becomes the cerebellum. Its major function is to coordinate voluntary muscles, and the pons, which joins the 2 halves of the cerebellum. The myelencephalon, finally, becomes the medulla oblongata. This contains visceral functions. Now, again, these functions are very, very simplified and designed to give you just a frame of reference. For example, you may wonder what's the difference in the hypothalamic function, visceral sensations, and the medulla function, visceral functions. Well, we'll address those at a later time. Part B, Glia. There are two types of peripheral nervous system glia: Schwann cells and satellite cells. Satellite cells are located near the cell bodies. At the present time, the function is not well understood. There are four types of central nervous system glia: astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, and ependymal cells. Schwann cells are shown in end view and side view. They form a myelinated axon by wrapping tightly around the axon to form the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath consists of tightly wrapped cell membrane. Thus, it's a fatty covering composed of phospholipid. The neurolemma is the Schwann cell cytoplasm on the outside of the myelin sheath. The gap between Schwann cells is called a node of Ranvier. Unmyelinated axons lack the Schwann cell. There are four types of central nervous system glia. One are the astrocytes. They're the most common glial cells. In fact, they make up something like 25% of all brain cells. They're large and star-shaped. Arms reach out to contact blood vessels and neurons, and they form a barrier called the blood-brain barrier. It's a physiological barrier rather than a physical barrier. It regulates the passage of most useful substances, such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and glucose. It prevents the passage of harmful substances. New evidence suggests that they may take up certain neurotransmitters, such as glutamate. In so doing, they regulate the concentration of substances around the synapse, which will in turn help regulate their function. Oligodendrocytes are another form of central nervous system glia. They form a myelin sheath in the central nervous system. Arms reach out and wrap around the axons, and they form the sheath. Microglia are phagocytic and a type of macrophage. And then there are ependymal cells. These are ciliated cells that line the passageways and ventricles of the brain. They form a choroid plexus where they contact blood vessels to secrete cerebrospinal fluid. The cilia, by waving and beating, promote the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. And that is a look at a general introduction to the nervous system. You're now ready to progress to Part C of Unit 11. Be careful, you must begin with the nerve impulse because the rest of Part C deals with other characteristics.